Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julia Borston, and I'm CNBC's Senior Media and Technology Correspondent. It is truly an honor to be here at the Aspen Institute to get to interview Ford CEO Jim Farley. Since Jim took over Ford in 2020, he's really worked to transform the organization with more transformation ahead, which is what we're going to get to talk about today. But I want to start out with an op-ed you just published this morning. For those of you who haven't gone to read it, Jim's going to walk you through it because it really lays out your vision, particularly around electric vehicles.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Julie. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you all for coming. Just show one picture, kind of summarize maybe who I am, which is, if we could put that up.
Put up the slide. I see a great picture here, but can we get it up here as well?
Someday it will come up. It's a picture of me when I was 16.
Here we go.
And it pretty much explains who I'm as a person. I drove across the country without a driver's license and insurance, much to my parents' chagrin in Michigan with my Mustang that I had bought that summer and lived in and restored and built a new engine. And since then, all I've really worked on and thought about is cars. I'm just an old school car person. And I guess I wrote the op-ed because I think many of us at Ford started to get tired of all the politics in the EV business. And I guess from my perspective, it's time to really take a step back and reflect on what it's like to actually drive an electric vehicle. Not for the save the planet part, but everything else. The actual human experience of driving an electric vehicle is wonderful. And for someone like a petrol head like me, whose family's from Detroit, I think the next picture, or the few one, that's me in my electric Lightning, which I took a road trip across California, all the way down to California with my son last summer, and I learned a lot as a leader. But that's my daily driver. I drive an electric Lightning, and I'm totally converted. And I don't know why we're all stuck talking about these vehicles as if all they really do is have no carbon footprint. What really convinced me of why we should invest in EVs on a personal level is because of the experience of driving past the gas station, of effortless acceleration on the highway, or passing someone, or decelerating without using the brakes. And if you go to the next slide, it's amazing. We have modems in all of our vehicles. When you actually look how Americans drive, which we have the longest spaces, the average American only takes less than 4 trips more than 150 miles. The normal range, max range now, even on a cold day for an EV now is about 300 miles. So 95% of Americans would have no problem living with an EV and not really having to charge on the road very often with home charging. Next slide is, early on, it was a really expensive thing. But with the collapse of the EV pricing, it's basically made EVs the same price as an internal combustion engine vehicle now. And for the future of Ford, which is the only company that didn't go bankrupt, only family-owned car company, it's really important for us to sort through this. Next slide. So I wrote the op-ed because this is my grandfather. He was the 389th employee of Ford. He joined when he was 14. That's his ID card in 1918. He had been at the company for 4 years. He started a year before Henry Ford introduced the moving assembly line, which he was all pissed off about because he used to build a whole car, and now he just built wheels. And like so many millions of families around the world affected by the Ford Motor Company, my mom went to college because of his job at Ford. And our whole family was transformed because of the company. And if we don't make this EV transition, Ford's not going to make it. That's how important this is for our country. And I just wish more people would be talking about the experience of driving instead of the politics of EV.
Such an amazing family history that really explains your passion for the role that you're in today and also for this next phase of Ford. But I want to just back up a little bit to what is keeping people from driving EVs. There's range anxiety. People are worried they're not going to be able to find a charger, or if it is a charger, is it the kind that they can use? What should consumers be thinking right now, especially as we see the sale of hybrids rise in a way that many people didn't expect? There was an expectation that we would just make a shift towards EVs, but instead we've seen hybrids really benefit from an increase in
Totally
sales.
true. Well, I think first of all, Ford believes in power of choice. So we're also number 3 in hybrids. So we're number 2 in EVs for 2.5 years now to Tesla. We're also number 3 in hybrid behind Honda, Toyota, that largely bet on hybrids and didn't bet on EVs. We're the only company that actually offers all of it, so we get to see the customers. With a hybrid like F-150, 25%. So F-150 is the best-selling vehicle in our country for 47 years. And as far as total revenue, it's number 2 to the iPhone in total revenue, because they're like $55,000. And we sell more than 1 million of them. We make a F-150 every 40 seconds. So 25% of all F-150s are hybrids now. And one of the most popular features of the hybrid is exportable power. Many people in Texas and in Florida and in California buy F-150 hybrids because they can power their house for 2 weeks when the power goes out. That's a sad statement about our country, but that's the reality. And so hybrids have become more popular. Our hybrid business is up 40% this year. And the pricing power is more than the cost of both powertrains. That means we make more money on a hybrid than on internal combustion F-150 now. I think hybrid's simple, right? You go in, it's 2 miles per gallon better on city and highway. You do the simple calculus, net present value of that, and you can kind of tell, is it worth $2,000? And electric, for Main Street customers, we're way past the early adopters now. And for the last 2 years, those early adopters are doing different math. They don't know about insurance. They don't know about the repair cost. They don't know how to compare electrons to fuel, even though it's 65% cheaper, electrons. It's a new thing for the math, for customers. But that's okay. The indication of hybrid is a good indication that electrification will go faster, because even the most traditional truck customers are buying hybrid. They're interested in electrification. It's just not a pure electric. This is a picture. By the way, electric's nothing new. We could easily be having this conversation about internal combustion. I just want to show this picture because my grandfather used to tell about all his buddies who worked in Detroit, and they didn't work at Ford. They worked at Detroit Electric. This is an ad from 1909. In 1909, in our industry, a third was steam, a third was electric, and a third was combustion. There was no guarantee that Henry Ford was going to win. We could easily be having this conversation now going, well, every car's electric. Why the heck do we have to put this gasoline in our vehicle? Easily could have happened. So I think, and when you read that ad, it's really interesting. Nothing about electric. It's all about how it feels to drive. And the predominant customers were women, because they didn't have to crank start the vehicle. They didn't have to get dirty. They didn't need a chauffeur. They could drive themselves. I guess my point is that we're in the first or second inning of a 9-inning game, and right now it's about choice, and regulators need to get their head around that. They can't be just betting on all electric. They need to understand that customers will make this transition based on their duty cycle, based on the way they drive, based on the number of vehicles they have in their household, and the transition's going to happen.
But do you think that it's misguided to really focus so much just on a total EV model?
Yes, but I think it's equally misguided to portray EVs as something, the total solution or the wrong solution.
But let's talk a little bit about pricing, though, because you've said that EVs should not be subsidized and automakers should push to profitably produce EVs. What do you see as a reasonable timeline for that?
5 years, the next generation of vehicles I think you're going to see, but you have to make a radical change as an OEM to get to a profitable EV. The first thing we have to do is really put all of our capital towards smaller, more affordable EVs. That's the duty cycle that we've now found that really matches. These big, huge, enormous EVs, they're never going to make money. The battery is $50,000. Even with low nickel LFP chemistry, the batteries will never be affordable. So we need to really redo our cycle plan to reflect what we've learned, smaller vehicles and commercial. What people aren't talking about, we're number one in commercial. The commercial electrification journey is going super fast, much faster than we thought. The electric transit, which is the number one van in the US, the mix is more than twice what we thought all electric, because people can have depot charging. If you're a plumber electrician, you know exactly what your route's going to be. It's repeatable. You don't overbuy the battery, so it's not super expensive. Retail customers are buying 300-mile batteries, never use them when we see the data. Commercial, they use 95% of their battery every day. So commercial is going much faster. I think we as an industry have to do our part. There's also kind of a China thing here.
You stole my next question.
Yeah.
China is making very inexpensive EVs.
They are.
And has better infrastructure for charging.
Yes. And all the trillions of profitability that were taken out of China by the Western OEMs, they were busy thinking about their industry strategically. And they bet on electrification about 10 years ago. And now they make 70% of all electric vehicles in the world are made in one country. They own all the battery processing. You want graphite, you want lithium processed to put in a battery, automotive battery, a nickel, you need to go to China. So they have unique battery chemistry like LFP, iron phosphate, which is half the cost, has no fire risk, and can be charged twice as many cycles. So there's unique IP in China now. And many of the companies are sponsored by the government. So we as a company face a kind of ultimate fitness test on this question of making money on EVs. If we cannot make money on EVs, we have competitors who have the largest market in the world, who already dominate globally, who are already setting up their supply chain around the world. And if we don't make profitable EVs next 5 years, what's the future? We just shrink into North America.
So to talk a little bit more about competition with China, how do you see the Biden administration's tariffs on EVs impacting the Chinese government and how they approach you and Ford and also other automakers?
Yes. Well, I think it's the answer to that question is very different for each auto company. We do not have a big China business. GM has a huge one. Volkswagen has enormous. I think 60% of Volkswagen's global profit comes from China. So every company has a different exposure. Look, I think the tariffs and the policy decisions that the president has to make quickly will level the playing field. The state subsidies of free taxes, free land, a lot of R&D, we don't have the benefit from. The IRA really does help. It incentivizes us for making automotive batteries in the U.S. We made many decisions to actually make in the U.S. now because of the IRA. But the biggest issue is those are going to be speed bumps. I worked at Toyota for 25 years as an American. I mean, we have NAFTA. They're 25% of the Mexican market already, the Chinese. We can all drive to Mexico one day. 1 out of every 4 vehicles sold in Mexico is made by a Chinese company. And they will have enough scale in China to build plants there and export tariff-free to the U.S. That's only a matter of time. That's why we have to be fully fit. That's why we created Skunk Works, because we have to compete against the Chinese players. And the biggest thing the administration has to do on creating a level playing field is that people don't really realize how technologically risky these products are. The new vehicles that we're making at Ford or any of the Western OEMs are data collection machines. We have to run the vehicles. So they're like mobile drones. We have 8 cameras on the average Ford. Who you talk to, where you go, who you drive by. And in China, we're not allowed to park a Ford next to a government building because of all those cameras. So what is the administration going to do about data privacy? In China, they have those rules. We do not have them in the U.S.
We're talking about concerns about TikTok, but what you're talking about
Forget about Huawei and TikTok. Think about a Chinese vehicle and what their government could learn about our country, let alone partial electrification. You can crash the car in anything you want remotely. So these vehicles, so in China, if we want to get our partial electric hands-free AV approved, we have to go through their Defense Department. Elon was just there getting a, by the way, Elon deserves a lot of credit for this journey about electrification. He really does. But back to China, you know, for our national defense, we have to make up our mind. What kind of approval should we send a Chinese OEM's self-driving system through in our country? These are the real policy decisions. And then we have to get serious about being independent, about processing raw materials and mining. Again, whether we do it with friendly countries like Canada or other places like South America, or do it ourselves, or else we're just trading one dependency for another.
And so talk a little bit more about that and this idea of the raw materials that are so essential for the batteries, and also the chips that you need to use.
Yes, 95% of the value of a battery, whether it's in your phone or in a car that's electric, is the raw materials. In an NCM cell, that's cobalt, nickel, and lithium. You can mine it, but you have to be processed. You also need graphite to make a battery. So those four essential materials, plus the rare earths that make the magnets to go in your electric motor, all have to come from somewhere.
And how do you think about Ford's independence on those?
We decided to, because we don't have the battery IP in the US. So we went to South Korean and Japanese companies and some Chinese companies, and we said, look, we're going to buy your batteries, but your raw material ecosystem has to be okay with us. So we're not only going to require you to redo your ecosystem, where you mine, where you process, but we're going to have governance around child labor, corruption, all the other things that we need to inspect. It's super important for our reputation. We're a family 120-year-old company. I'm not going to take a risk on that. And so we went to friendly countries. But the government hasn't really required that. There's an incentive in the IRA to do it that way, but it's not required. And with the Chinese coming here, we're going to face this raw material. And then semiconductors are the same. We have 1,500 semiconductors in the average Ford. Not all of them are 2-nanometer advanced AI chips. Many of them are just industrial chips that raise and lower your window digitally, or remotely operate your brake pedal. And more of those are made in China. Not for Ford, but we have $8,000 worth of silicon chips in the average Ford. And there's a lot of pressure to save 10% to go to the cheapest player. So will Americans pay more for semiconductors that are made in places that are friendly to the U.S.? I don't know.
So you've referenced the IRA a couple of times.
Yes.
As you look at this upcoming presidential election, how much does its outcome impact your business? You talk about regulations. You talk about the need for energy independence, for battery independence. How are you looking at this presidential election cycle?
Okay, so we've been in business 120 years. We've seen a lot of different kinds of political leaders in our country. So Ford is very experienced with these transitions. And we have our agenda, and we want to run our business according to customer choice. I don't want to get into politics of what's going to happen, but clearly there'll be policy shifts. We thought through a lot of those, most of them I would say, and I think many of them will have big impacts on our journey to lower CO2, journey to digital product. And I think we'll have to work through it like we always have for 120 years.
And through all of this and all of this change and uncertainty, you're focused on innovation. And you made the controversial decision and the bold decision to create this skunk works plant in Southern California to innovate around lower cost EVs.
Yes.
What led to that decision? And can you give us any news about these vehicles? Pricing, what they're going to look like?
Okay. So Ford was one of the first movers after Tesla to go into the EV business. We decided to electrify our three most iconic U.S. brands. Mustang, we created an electric Mustang utility, our transit van, so we made an electric van, and the F-150. And we learned a lot. And we learned that if you just take your internal combustion engineers, supply chain, and manufacturing people, and you ask them to make an EV, it's not going to be a great EV. What I mean is the customer-facing part is great, but we lose $5 billion on our EVs.
You said 5 years to profitability. How much are these new lower cost?
So that's the bet. For example, wiring harness. All your vehicles have a wiring harness. The traditional thinking in internal combustion world is bid out your wiring harness to many different suppliers and then pick the lowest cost, the highest quality supplier. In an EV where the battery costs $30,000 and your wiring harness weighs 70 pounds extra, that's $200 a battery. So the math totally changes around the weight when you have a big expensive battery in your vehicle. It's better to actually invest in super lightweight wiring. So an EV requires completely different engineering to optimize around the smallest possible battery for the most affordability for customers. Aerodynamics, huge impact on an EV, way more than an ICE vehicle because of the battery size. So even the way you build a vehicle, it has to be radically rethought. The way we're thinking about building a vehicle now is not do the body structure and then paint it and then put the seats and the powertrain in it. Build the right and the left and the front and the rear separately so the workers can go in and put seats and carpeting and whatever else in the vehicle, and you don't have to have large construction kind of assistant for them. Another one is put the computer in right after you paint it so it diagnoses itself whether it's being built correctly. No vision systems, no looking over our workers' shoulder to make sure they did a fastener right. It requires a completely different rethinking because the battery is so expensive. So we created the Skunk Works 2 years ago with Alan Clark, who was the chief engineer of the Model Y, Model 3, came from Tesla, left Tesla to go to Ford. And my badge doesn't work there. It's totally separate from Ford. And they've had a completely different approach. And it looks like, they're going to be successful. We're going to bet the company on them. It's a very American thing.
So when do you think we'll see what a vehicle out of there looks like, and what kind of price point are you?
2.5 years.
Okay.
And we're shooting for a $30,000 car. And to be profitable. And we think the main competitors will be the new model Tesla 2. We think Tesla will come out with an affordable vehicle, and the Chinese players from BYD and the state-owned enterprises and so that's really a challenger project in the company.
I can't wait to see it. Now, you've referenced the way that this new technology is building these cars differently, and I'm sure that AI is a big part of that.
Yes.
And I would assume you're also using AI as you build your traditional vehicles and the EVs you're also making.
Yes.
I've hosted a conversation this morning about AI in the workforce with Mary Daly, the president of the San Francisco Fed, and also with Vimal Kapoor, who's CEO of Honeywell. And there's no doubt that AI is going to continue to impact the way things are made. How are you already deploying AI, and how do you see it changing your workforce?
It's a huge impact to a company like Ford. We have 200,000 employees around the world. Most of them make vehicles every day. And so we have forecasting and shift planning, and we have a lot of tasks that humans work every day to do that AI can allow those same people to kind of do different kind of work that's more valuable. And I think the biggest impact in the first inning of this is going to be on our industrial system, our supply chain, identifying risk before humans can, helping us decide what is the best supplier for us. So much of the supply chain, which is super strategic in a company like Ford, a lot of that is just crunching numbers and making good decisions based on data. And so the way we make a car, the supply chain and the engineering to me is the most impactful. Of course, we have 12,000 software engineers, so we can allow AI to do a lot of the simple programming for us so that our software programmers can do higher level things, like diagnose problems in our vehicle software. And then, of course, AI assistant in the vehicle. You know, the vehicles are not like your cell phone. We have safety critical systems. We'll have eyes off the road autonomy. We already are number one in hands-free autonomy. So all those safety warnings going on, content, it's really intimidating for a person. AI assistant in the vehicle can make all of that a lot easier. And I'm not sure we want to just rely on Siri or whoever you use on your mobile phone. So AI will be in all parts of our business. I think the biggest bet we'll make will be in the industrial system.
And do you see jobs being replaced by AI?
No, I think what we see is people doing different work because of AI. You know, we've been in business for 120 years. What my grandfather did on the plant floor and what my grandfather would do today if he worked at Ford are totally different. Mm-hmm. We've been using technology to move people's work statement and shift it over time for a long time. I think it's just another version of that, but it's very powerful. The other part of AI that we have to think about as a society is, what are we going to do with all the data centers to process all this data? Our grid can't handle what we have today. Are we going to build 20% more power plants to handle all these AI data centers? Are the companies going to start to create their own power centers? What do we feel as a society when a private company operates, you know, a private power plant? Can the electrons in the batteries of these vehicles be used to offset some of the future power plant build-out requirements? I think so. Normally, our customers charge at night, late at night, and I think the grid will hopefully get more intelligent. Well, they'll charge at 2 or 3 in the morning where the electrons are cheapest, and then they're going to have a lot of electrons when there's peak. And will we be able to sell those electrons back to the grid to reduce the requirement? I think we're going to have to struggle with problems like that with this AI explosion.
Well, the AI explosion is part of this, but what you're referencing here, which you've talked about a little bit in the conversation earlier, is this idea that your Ford EVs are different than the Tesla EVs.
Yes,
Tesla's
totally different.
You could charge, but
Yes.
your EVs, not only can you charge up your car, but then you could also use the battery of the car to charge up a house.
Yes. Yes.
Walk us through your philosophy around that and what you think that could mean for the grid and for infrastructure.
So we've just seen a big change in customers where they want their vehicle to be used stationary or to be independent of the grid.
Stationary meaning like I'm parked, I'm sitting in my car,
Yes.
the air conditioning is on, and
Yes.
I'm catching up on email.
And I could do deep breathing, or I can I can use it as a mini house when I'm camping, or I can use it as a mobile office if I'm a plumber or electrician. We see more and more people using their vehicles as the third space. And also, we see more people in American society worried about the grid stability and even worried about fresh water, things like that. So we really saw that, and we started to realize that as we go electric, even partial electric with hybrid, we need to have bidirectional charging and flow. We should have a hybrid F-150 be able to power a job site or maybe a tailgate or your house if you're in Texas and you lose energy for a couple of weeks. And that's one of the reasons why people are buying our hybrids. The same for electric. You know, when Elon started, I think he had no choice, right? There was no charging, and a lot of people wanted to save electrons in their house to arbitrage the grid. So he created an energy business. We decided not to do that. So we decided to put bidirectional charging on all of our EVs. We're just waiting for the rest of society to keep up with that. Like, what are you going to do if you can send your electrons out of your Ford? We got to get the utility companies serious about this. The grids start to get digital. But if you own an electric Ford, you're going to have that capability. In the short term, you'll have you don't have to buy a $10,000 Honda generator at a job site. You go to any big job site now, there are all these generators going. They're expensive. They're noisy. Just use your truck. It's a lot simpler. And the same for your house. All the wealthy people I know, they have, these expensive generators. We don't need them. We can use our car to do that.
But how does the rest of the infrastructure need to evolve so it's not just a one-off, a guy, or not one-off, but there's the whole category of people who can use their trucks to power their job sites, but more big picture about making sure that the grid is more energy efficient when there are blackouts or the like?
I think the ultimate thing is we have to make our grid intelligent, and all the pieces that plug in and out of it have to be intelligent too, and it has to be a system. And we need to have some opinion-leading utilities and regulators and leaders, policy leaders, take this on. I don't know where it's going to happen, but I guarantee you somewhere in the U.S., somewhere in the world, it may be China actually, where this all gets integrated soon. And bidirectional charging, I believe, should be required for all electric vehicles. Why would you buy an electric vehicle and not be able to export the power? That seems selfish, frankly. And I think it's something that should be required for all companies making electric vehicles, even for the future. But the build out of that is going to take time. And so someone has to go first. Someone has to do a pilot. Someone has to take it on.
It sounds like it's a priority for you.
It is. We've been asking utilities to do this for 2 years. We've gotten nowhere. It's extremely frustrating for us. Bill Ford is such a visionary. We're so lucky to have him as chairman, and he saw this many years before the company did. But we had trouble getting that first rotation.
Before we open up to questions, I want to ask you a little bit about self-driving.
Sure.
And how you think about autonomous and the bets you've made and chosen not to make.
Yes.
And how you see it fitting into your future.
Well, when I became the CEO, we were spending $1 billion a year on robo taxis. A company, the Argo AI, that would build a vehicle that would pick up people and drop them off. And we decided, it was so expensive, we did it with Volkswagen. And we decided to stop that 2 years ago and put kind of student body left into highway level 3, which is autonomy. The first operating domains would be on a sunny day in America. You're on the highway going 80 miles an hour, and you could take your eyes off the road. And we think that is a bigger problem statement for our society today and a bigger unlock for people than someone getting a robo-taxi drive. And there's a couple reasons for that. First is the reality with robo-taxis is we find that the technology is limited. So if it rains or snows or has any kind of problem, you have to have a backup plan where you're not going to get a ride. So if the robo-taxis don't work, you need a physical backup plan when the technology can't handle the weather. And that felt like maybe that won't happen for a while. The second thing is many of the robotaxi companies have large warehouses filled with people remotely controlling the vehicle. They're not really autonomous because someone has to watch them. And we didn't like that. We didn't like that sense that we would have to do that. The third thing was we couldn't figure out removing the driver would create a business. It just didn't seem like a compelling business. And the biggest thing was the regulators. We just couldn't see regulators agreeing on having all these robotaxis around because we felt like it would add a lot of congestion. They'd be roaming around. If it wasn't highly regulated, we would just be creating a lot of congestion. And maybe even if they're all electric vehicles, that's a different kind of problem. We all felt like, as a team, that was just too many issues, and it would be better to take all those technology people and go over here on highway because we feel like those miles people do every day, and they're dangerous miles. People are getting killed every day because of distracted driving on highway. And people who don't drive, we have adaptive cruise control that already does it. We have lane keeping, And now we have to have redundancy, braking and steering, and we have to have LiDAR so you can get from 35 miles an hour or hands-free today, which is, with a LiDAR system, you have to look a lot further ahead at 80 miles an hour. And so with better sensors, better AI processing, better models, we think in a couple years we should be able to offer the industry highway autonomy. So we think hands-free as a gateway to eyes off on the highway is a better unlock for customers. Hey, I never thought when I was a young man entering the industry that our industry could give people 45 minutes back in their life. That's pretty cool. I never thought that could happen, but it can happen on a highway trip on the way here to Aspen.
I'll take 45 minutes. Before we open up to questions, I just have to ask a quick question to you about Elon Musk. You've referenced Tesla, or I should say specifically about Tesla, but you've mentioned Musk a couple of times, mentioned Tesla, mentioned them as competition, and also how you're taking a different approach. In this next phase, as you continue to transform Ford, how do you think about differentiation and competition with them and the fact that Tesla is number one in the EV space?
They are. Actually, BYD is now globally number one. Tesla is, well, first of all, I think we'll all be very thankful that this journey was started by his vision. And he proved that we can make electric cars profitably. That's really amazing. Aside from all the rest, he was incredibly gracious to allow Ford to join the supercharger network. And for our customers, we're number 2, as I said, 2.5 years. For our customers to have access to the Tesla supercharger networks, he didn't have to do that. But he did it because he was a mission-driven person. And so I think we'll always be grateful for that cooperation. I did my op-ed today. I don't think he was super happy that it went in LinkedIn before X. But anyways, so I think, look, we have a different bet as a company than Elon's bet. Our bet from learning from this first generation is that we will compete with him at the low end, but we won't make commodity products. I believe Ford's at its best when it makes work vehicles or passion vehicles like Bronco, Mustang, F-150s. That's where we're at our best. So I think we'll be competitors, but he's not in the commercial space, and we dominate. Our second place competitor, GM, isn't half as big as us. And on the EV side, we're even more ahead of everyone. They don't even have an electric van. We're 75% of all electric vans in the US now. So we dominate. 40% of our electric commercial customers buy Ford charging systems. So we're the supercharger of commercial. And so I don't think he'll go into that business. And I think on the low end, we'll be competing with each other on all aspects. Full self-driving versus Ford's highway driving, the vehicle itself. But when you get in a Ford, it won't feel like a Tesla. It'll feel differently. And it'll feel like a place you may want to do work or spend a lot of time on.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great note to go to Q&A on. And we have some questions down here. Do we have some microphone?
Two-part question. And I appreciate your characterizing remarks about the experiential part of driving.
Yes.
Oh, okay. About the experiential part of driving.
Yes.
I just happened to watch a clip about from Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah.
And for some of us who are like sort of passionate sports car
Yes,
drivers
yes,
and like the downshift, it's not just going fast or slow.
Yes.
So how can you recreate that experience in an electric vehicle for those of us who prefer a Porsche? And the second part of it is, if you don't have a Ford 150 or a Tesla Powerwall, how are you going to power your house?
Buy an F-150. So I think we learned a lot about Pro Power on board, so you'll see it in a lot of other vehicles. That's the marketing name for exportable power. So look, there's a lot of good news for us. I race Mustangs on the weekend, and so I love all that. Partial electrification. Rimac came out with an all-electric supercar. There's been a few. They haven't sold any of them. So what clearly is happening is partial electric is the way to go. High performance. So I think what you're going to see is this. A vehicle that's digital and partially electric where you use the full acceleration for electric, but regen to power that, to repower it with a petrol engine that's super efficient. I would argue even synthetic fuel, man-made fuel. We're starting to mess around with that. Most of the racing series are going to low carbon or zero carbon man-made fuel now. Formula One will go in 26. So you're going to see a lot of experimentation in performance applications with low carbon fuel, but a petrol engine using electric, and then digital control the whole vehicle. So you can control the damping, braking bias, everything from your phone. So I want the Max Verstappen setting for my Mustang or 911. That's going to happen soon. I think that's the future. And we shouldn't be scared of that because it's going to be as exciting as an all-electric vehicle. It's just a little different than what we thought it was going to be a couple years ago.
Another question right there. Here, their microphone, sorry. Then I'll switch to the side of the room.
Weight is a problem with EVs.
Yes, it is.
And Ford was brilliant with regard to the F-150 when you took 750 pounds out of the F-150 by putting more aluminum in. You mentioned first and second inning in EV. Do you see the possibility of taking 700 pounds out as batteries develop over time?
Yes, we have to. You're absolutely right. This is Colin Chapman was right. This is the enemy. Weight is the enemy. So this is the number one focus other than energy efficiency. It's like that Apollo meeting when I go see my skunk team. They have like a big board and they're measuring wattage and usage for every system in the vehicle to get the battery as small as possible. But even beyond that, we have to do things with body structures, all the chassis systems. We have to take massive weight out of it. And one of the big advantages to do that is we used to build car with lots of pieces, and then we'd weld the piece together and make a structural element. This large unit casting is like a really big change. And you'll start to see components of the car look more like, I hate to say this, but like natural pieces. They'll look more like insects than man-made things because of the light weighting, new additive manufacturing.
Is Tesla doing that in the German factory?
That is step one, but I'm saying like the next couple steps will be advanced materials, additive manufacturing with new body structures and new large castings. That will be able to take a lot of weight out of and complexity out of the vehicle. With a lot of aerodynamics, advanced materials, and smaller vehicles. We have to start to get back in love with smaller vehicles. It's super important for our society and for EV adoption. We are just in love with these monster vehicles. And I love them too, but it's a major issue with weight.
Let's go to a question over on this side.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. My name is Omar Sevilla. I teach automotive technology in San Diego at the high school and community college level. I'm also a founder of the San Diego sdtex.org. We're a collaborative where we connect community partners, dealerships, private sector shops, and educators together. LA Unified School District has 9 automotive programs remaining out of 85 since 1980. San Diego County has 20 high school programs, 5 community college programs.
Yeah, well aware of the issue.
Yeah, so you know the issue.
I do.
I hold a conference each year. This last year in May, we put together a conference, 150 educators, and we did 100% EV focus. We did a workshop where we replaced a Tesla battery. Incredible stuff. We're making progress. So my question is, we need ideas for how to continue to get more buy-in from the local dealerships to support our programs and really be advocates for us.
Yeah, totally get it. So yeah, this is one of the biggest issues in our industry. I don't want to get super technical, but the lack of technicians in our industry is going to be a big constraining factor in how to work on these digital electric vehicles. It's totally different kind of work, as you said, as you know. And so I think the company has to take it on. And we have to use our dealers in local communities to start doing these technology programs that the schools no longer do. We have to displace, because the schools have dropped them all.
Well, they're paying like...
I got it.
Yeah,
And these are good jobs. I mean, we can, $150,000 a year is not unusual at all. So I think the burden falls on our company, and frankly, there's a good commercial reason behind it. So it's very interesting. It's like you literally were inside my meeting this morning because we were discussing this very thing. I think we need about 10,000 technicians at Ford. There you go.
Let's go to a question down here. Hopefully we can squeeze in a couple more.
Thank you. Looking far into the future, as you perfect the self-driven automobile, why will it be necessary for individuals to own a car on their own?
Don't have to be. Yeah, you're right. It isn't necessary. Actually, I think at first we started these subscription businesses, but they really never went anywhere because it's still kind of individual ownership. I hope a market evolves enough where there are financial markets, so to speak, for people. You go to Europe, and the largest owner of vehicles are fleet, not individuals, fleet. These company owns millions and millions of vehicles, and they can there's financial markets. And see, the reason why that's so important, what you said, is because of reuse of the batteries. See, if you use individuals to own these vehicles, you will limit the amount of reuse in the batteries. Unlike the past in recycling, 99% of the raw materials can be reused and put into a brand new battery. So eventually we'll be able to the industry will be big enough, it will be self-perpetuating. We do not need to mine or process anything more because there's enough vehicles with the batteries in our society. So fleet ownership will be really important because that closed loop of recycling will be enabled by that, as well as making it affordable. And I think we're starting to see that with fleets in Europe, but we haven't really seen it in the US. Hertz tried, it didn't really work out because the collapse of pricing in EVs really put a huge burden on their balance sheet because they owned all those vehicles that were now 20% less valuable. But I still, I think individual companies are starting to do it. Elon's talking about it with Tesla. I mean, a robotaxi business, and he's going to start being the broker between individuals, and he's obviously hinting on multiple owners. In South America, where Ford's been for over 100 years, we have many people who buy vehicles in groups. It's been going on for 100 years. It's called Consortio, and we have 20 or 30 people who buy a vehicle together, and then they decide how to share it. This is something that happens in the rest of the world. It just hasn't happened in America. And I think it's definitely something Ford will take on. Once we get the affordable vehicle and we get advanced autonomy, we then have the chance to start to own the fleet. And then we could be the stewards of recycling and refreshing the vehicle. That means we re-engineer it differently so we can refresh it. Upgrade the technology so we don't have to throw the metal away. It's much more efficient if we had an owner that owned the vehicle for its full life. Makes sense.
Let's squeeze in one more question. There was one right here in the front.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about the batteries.
Yes.
They're being made in China, and what happens if we get in a trade war and China gets vindictive? What happens to our domestic car business, EV business?
So the batteries, 99% of the current batteries in Teslas and Fords are from South Korean and Japanese technology. But the materials that go into them are Chinese. They're processed in China. So even if a lithium mine in Argentina, where I was born, that all gets shipped to China for processing. And then those companies put it in a battery. Look, it's a very serious topic. And that's why Ford is trying to do its part to diversify. When we buy those batteries, we insist that the mining and the processing is done in places that we like. Not all companies will do that. And that means that there will be risk. And we're trading one risk for another risk. But just because it's another risk doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I give Elon a lot of credit because he's actually processing nickel and lithium in Texas right now. It's very small scale, but he's learning how to actually do it in America. He doesn't promote it, but it's a really important experiment for our country. If we get into big trade war in the Taiwan Straits, a blockade of Taiwan, whatever, and it gets really ugly, yes. I'm actually less worried about that. I'm more worried about data privacy and national security with autonomous vehicles.
Wow, well, we are out of time, but what a fascinating, wide-ranging conversation. Thank you so much, Jim Farley. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you.